we are going to start one of my favorite projects of the year. And the reason I like this so much is because it's what I call a feel-good project. It doesn't require you to be an amazing artist to get amazing results. In this video, we will talk about staying organized, how to get our photo references and the rules on how we will use them, the project objectives, which are the things that I am looking for and ultimately what I'm grading you on, and we will end with a time-lapse video of my piece from start to finish. Be sure to watch the entire video as there will be a worksheet to complete based on the content of the video. Let's begin. To start, we're going to get organized, and that just means that we're going to keep all of the resources we need for this project in one folder. To do that, we will simply right-click on the desktop, then go to New in the drop menu, and click Folder. And there's our new folder. Now we're going to name this Zentangle. This is the folder we will use to store our photo references for the project. So everyone has looked up photos online, and if you're an artist, you've definitely looked up photos to use for a reference. However, there are better and worse ways to do it, so before we get started, here are a few quick tips on how to search for photo references. The first step in this project is to pick an object, an animal, or a person, and I've decided to keep it simple and draw some fish. If I just look up the word fish, I'm going to get a ton of results. So for my first tip, be specific with your search. You probably have some idea of what you want your object to look like when you draw it, so think of action words or descriptors to refine your search. I already know that I want to draw koi fish specifically, so I will start there. I'm pretty happy with the results, but I'm not sure if these photos are of good quality. This brings me to my next tip. You can modify your search using these filters provided in the Tools menu. For our purposes today, I'm going to click on Size, then Large. This will filter out any images with dimensions smaller than 500 pixels. Now I can scroll through these and find a few images that I like. Once I find one, I will right-click on that image and click Open Image in a new tab. The reason I'm doing this is because it will let me see what this image will look like when I zoom in and out, and ultimately help me determine the quality of the photo. And then I'll continue my search, which brings me to tip number 3, cast a wide net. That just means that I'm not going to limit myself to the first image I like. I'm going to scroll through and try to find maybe 4 or 5 images. Once I gather a good amount of photos, I will look through the tabs to see which ones I like best and save those in my folder. Then I will choose the ones I want to use for my piece. There is something you always need to consider before you start a project using an online photo reference, and that is copyright law. In 2009, artist Shepard Fairey was sued by the Associated Press for using a photo of Barack Obama taken by reporter Manny Garcia. Fairey claimed that his piece fell under the doctrine of fair use, which is a law that relates to the use of copyrighted material. Here is the portion of that law relating to Shepard Fairey's case. Under this factor, courts look at both the quantity and quality of the copyrighted material that was used. If the use includes a large portion of the copyrighted work, fair use is less likely to be found. If the use employs only a small amount of copyrighted material, fair use is more likely. That said, some courts have found use of an entire work to be fair under certain circumstances, and in other contexts, using even a small amount of a copyrighted work was determined to not be fair because the selection was an important part or the heart of the work. To translate, copying a little is okay sometimes, but sometimes it isn't. And copying a lot is probably not okay, but sometimes it is. So obviously this law is vague, but we want to make sure that we err on the side of caution. So just make sure you keep these 2 things in mind. First, the photo you are using is someone's art. And while it is okay to use pieces of someone else's work to inspire your own, it is never okay to find a photograph online and copy it outright. Always be sure that your work has considerable creative contributions as a finished product. Next, never use a drawing or painting as a photo reference. It is too tempting to copy someone else's style or composition. A big part of this course is learning how to draw from life. If you're copying someone else's drawing, they've already done a lot of the work for you. So just make sure your images are photographs. While Shepard Fairey's case got more complicated with him lying about the photo reference he used, this little mistake cost him $25,000 in legal fees and 2 years of probation. Let's try to avoid that, shall we? Okay, so now that we have our photo references, it's time to get the project going. This is just a time lapse of me completing the actual project, but periodically I will stop and fill you in on what I'm doing and offer you some tips. To start, I'm going to draw my objects, and notice how lightly I'm drawing. This is something you'll hear me say all year for every project. You need to be able to erase in case you make a mistake, so always start by drawing lightly. If you want to make it darker, you can always go back over it later. Now I'm adding my 3 shapes. It doesn't really matter where you put these or how you put them down. Some of them I'm actually drawing through my fish, some of them are just in the background. You just want to get something down to break up some of the negative space. The same goes for my lines. I'm trying to use them to break up the larger spaces. Also, make sure that you read the directions carefully. I'm saying a minimum of 3 lines and shapes, but it's totally up to you. If you still have spots that are just too big, feel free to add more lines and shapes to break up that negative space. Now it's time to fill in the patterns. All of my lines and shapes have created smaller shapes that I'm going to fill in with my patterns. Make sure you have your pattern tile assignment handy to use as a reference. Now I'm just filling these in with my marker, but if you're not comfortable doing that just yet, feel free to start with a pencil and then go over it with a I don't want you to When I say be creative and thoughtful, I mean set the standard high for yourself. Here is the finished product. I've also included some images of student work just to show you what I mean when I say you don't need to be a great artist to get great results.